and in today's video I'm going to show you the entire process of making a concrete statue using a latex rubber only mold. And when I say latex rubber only mold, I don't mean a mold like this. Now most of the time when you look up molds for making statues, they're going to be like this, to where they have the rubber mold such as this, and then you're going to have some sort of shell or mother mold on the outside. In this case, I made this fiberglass composite shell that holds the rubber in place. It has support legs, so it'll stand up on its own. It makes it quick and easy to use. So this is great if you're wanting to do a lot of molds and not spend a lot of time preparing them. That's the real purpose of this. It just makes it quick and easy. However, these type molds will cost more in general than a rubber only mold such as this one here. Now, rubber only mold, what you want to look for, because I see people contact me all the time where they buy them and they get them and they're not sure how they're going to work. You need to make sure a rubber only mold is thick enough and has enough strength that it's going to spring back to its original shape. You don't want it real flimsy and light to where it's paper thin. I've seen some of those. Those aren't going to work. It has to have some strength to it. You also don't want it extremely large. I've seen some folks, they buy a big lion statue mold and they get it and it's this big rubber only mold and they can't figure out how to use it. It's probably not going to work. You probably also want to avoid seams in the rubber. Now some molds that come with fiberglass backings, for instance, will have it so that the rubber has an opening in it for really detailed pieces so you can actually pry apart the rubber around the statue. Those aren't good to have in rubber only. You want a basic simple style statue. They need to be fairly small. Now they don't have to be this small. You know, I have stuff that I make for my website that's probably 3-4 times the size of this one, but you don't want a really big statue. They need to be relatively small because you have to prepare them with a little bit extra time for using. And that's what I'm going to show you here in a moment. And that's the main disadvantage, in my opinion, is yes, these are cheaper, so they're great for beginners and they're easy to use. They simply require a little more time because you don't have that backing to hold them in place. So we have to do something a little different, but it's not that hard. I'm going to show you right now. All right, now it's time to prepare our mold. I do want to make a little disclaimer. I'm outside right now. It's a bright, hot summer day. I'm doing that because of the video. It's a little hard to get proper lighting in any of my work areas, so I'm doing this outside, but I do not recommend leaving your molds long-term outside. So if you have an outdoor work spot, that's fine. Make sure it's covered and shaded because first of all, latex rubber over time from UV rays from the sun will deteriorate. Second of all, you don't want your concrete drying too fast, and if they're in direct sun, it can dry your cement mixture so fast that your finished concrete can actually crack. So it's better to keep them shaded or in a workshop or a garage, something like that. But again, for the sake of the video, we're going to be outside. All right, so the first step for preparing a rubber mold like this for concrete is to put a mold release. Now, if I was going to use plaster in here, all you need to do is wet this. You put water in, let it drain out, and you're good for plaster. But we're going to be using a cement mixture because we want a concrete statue. So I have my handy dandy bottle of mold release, which is simply rubbing alcohol with just a little bit of castor oil mixed in. The castor oil is actually the mold release. The alcohol is what you use to dilute the castor oil. You just put in a bottle like this and then you just spray the entire interior of the mold. I don't mind getting it really soaked in there because then what I do is in this bucket here, I just have some water. You can do this with a hose or anything, but I just take my molds, and I do this with all my molds, by the way, all the rubber molds. I then just dunk it in the water, and then I'm just gonna let it sit there for a few minutes so that the excess water and any excess mold release will drain out. It only has to be 2-3 minutes, but you don't want any water or liquid inside the mold pooling up. So we're gonna let that sit there for a minute, and we'll be right back to go to the next step. All right, it's been a few minutes. The mold is now drained. There's no excess mold release, no excess water in it, so it's ready to set up. Now this is where a rubber only mold takes a little bit of extra time because again, we don't have that mother mold around it to hold it in place, so we have to make do with whatever we can find. Now usually folks will use something like sand, which is great. In this case, I have a little box here with a material called perlite. Perlite is used in bedding for, I believe, cactus, things like that. You can find it in your local garden center, but it's almost like styrofoam. It's very light. Sometimes I'll use sand, sometimes I use this, sometimes I use a combination of sand and perlite. But basically what you want to do is make sure you don't get any of the material in the mold, and then just get it and kind of get the mold buried down in to whatever material you're using. It doesn't have to go all the way in, just enough that you can kind of hold it in place. And the nice thing about the perlite is it's so light, it's easy to move around. With sand though, what's nice is that it's so fine you can move it around and then wet it to pack it in better. Then make sure the interior of your mold is looking the right shape. You don't want a big bulge in the side or anything to where your statue is going to come out, just like a dented bread pan, for instance. Same concept here. But at this point, we're pretty much ready to go, and we're going to make the mix. But before we do, I want to just share one little bit of information that I don't think I've ever mentioned before on any of my videos. If you have a brand new rubber mold and it's the first time you use it, do not be surprised if your very first statue, your very first casting comes out a little rough. I don't know why, but it's a very common thing when a mold is used the first time. I have attributed it to the fact that maybe the mold needs to be broken in. Maybe the first time getting the mold released, it has to absorb into the rubber. I'm not really sure, but don't be too alarmed if your very first piece comes out a little rough looking. Usually after your first casting, everyone from then on should look much better. So just to let you know, this is a used mold though, so it's not going to really be an issue. I just wanted to share that. All right, let's go ahead and make our mix, and we're going to pour it into this mold right now. Okay, it's time to make our cement mix. Now, if you've seen any of my past videos, you know how I talk about how easy it is to make a mix on a small scale using a drill with a mixing paddle. I'm gonna do one better today. Because we're just doing a small little mold, I'm gonna do it by hand. And you can do it by hand even if you have a handful of small molds. It's not very hard, and you don't even need a drill to do this. So here's all I have is a bucket. Then I have a cup here with some water, 1 cup of a pre-bagged cement mix. Now this is from, I'll tell you where I got it. This is from Lowe's, but Home Depot carries it. Most of your home supply stores will have pre-bagged cement. I like this one because the gravel in it is pea gravel size. I don't like the real big chunks of rock. Pea gravel is about good. But this entire bag of this material that it came from was less than $5. And I don't even need this much. I'm making a little extra just to be safe. Then the last thing I have is just a little bit of Portland cement. The reason being, and here's the secret with using these pre-bagged mixes, they don't have quite enough Portland cement in them when you're making statues. They're fine for using for, you know, putting up fence posts, things like that. But when it comes to making statues with it, you want a little richer cement mixture. So I add just a little bit of Portland every time I use these pre-bagged, and that seems to make them work perfectly. So here's what we're gonna do. I always start with a bit of water, not a lot, just a little, so that the mix doesn't stick and cake to the bottom of whatever container. Now this is a small bucket, but I oftentimes will use great big vats. Same thing, I'll add some water first, then I start adding material. Now in this case, I'm gonna add pretty much all this. I don't think I need it all, but I'm gonna add, and let's start there. Now, since I already have some water in there, I'm just gonna use this scrape here, and I'm just gonna mix it around. Way too thick. Right now it kind of looks like chunky mortar. We don't want that. What we want is a nice creamy mixture. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. When it comes to adding water, little at a time, just add a little, mix it in. You do not want it too watery. All right, can you see in there? It's nice and loose, but you can definitely see all the gravel and everything. That's fine. Now, I know a lot of people are like, how does that gravel not all sink to the bottom? It doesn't. Cement mixture, if you do it right, is perfect to where it stays all mixed at all times. And that's a pretty good consistency there. But, like I said, we need to add our Portland. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that in. That's probably enough. You don't need much. Put that in there. Now I'm going to mix that. All right. A little bit thick still, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. And I'm pretty sure that's going to do it right there. Yep, that looks good to me. And remember, if you get it and you think there's a little bit too much water, add a little bit more Portland cement just to thicken it up. It doesn't take long to kind of learn the feel and look of what you're looking for in the mix. So now I'm going to take this, and we're simply going to pour it into our mold here. And we'll see if I made enough or if I'm going to need to make more. Nope, definitely going to have to make more. But this actually is the right amount for the first step of shaking it here. You want to fill your mold about 2/3 of the way. And now you want to get as many air bubbles out as you can. So what you do is you just take this and you just shake it back and forth. You see the cement shifting there? That process will release more air than vibrating it. I know a lot of people use vibrating tables or actual clamp-on vibration units. This simple shifting motion when it comes to molds, I've not found anything better for releasing the air bubbles, and that's part of the reason why you want somewhat of a liquidy mix. Not watery, just liquidy. All right, so that's pretty good. So I'm gonna go and make a little bit more since I was a little short, and just add it to this. I'll be right back. All right, I've made a little bit more. Sorry, I don't normally do such small little batches, so I had to eyeball it and did a little short, but I always recommend make less than you think you need to be safe. I hate when I see people make a huge batch and have a lot of waste. It's always easy to just make a little bit more and top off as needed, no matter how many molds you have. So now that I have a little bit more, we're gonna take it, we're gonna go ahead and just put it in there. Scrape out the last little bit there. All right, let's give it another shake here. Back and forth, just enough. Just enough to make it shift back and forth. And if you, I don't know how well it's going to show up on the video, but you'll see little air bubbles rise to the surface. That's exactly what we want, because if those rise to the surface, remember, that's going to be the bottom of the statue. That's where we want any air bubbles to show and pop out, and any imperfections that might happen to be, because we can clean those up. We don't want them to be on what will be the surface of the statue. All right, so that's probably good at this point. However, I mentioned I didn't make quite enough. I still don't have quite enough in there. You notice it's a little low around the edge. I always like them to be a little bit above, because what I do is in about 20-30 minutes, I'm gonna come back and scrape it off with this. But you notice it's a little low. Well, this is ideal, because I'm gonna show you a little trick I do that is a way to use old broken pieces or pieces of trash concrete you might have when you have a situation like this. So I'll be right back. Okay, now when you start making concrete statues, inevitably you're gonna have the occasional misfire. You're gonna have a statue piece that doesn't turn out right. You're gonna accidentally drop one. I've been known to do that on occasion. And a lot of people will just think that's garbage, you gotta throw it away. No, you do not. Here's what I do. I take those old broken statues or chipped ones or ones that won't sell because they're not in good enough condition, I bust them up with a hammer, and now I have little chunks of odd shaped concrete. And then when you have a piece that you're pouring and you don't have quite enough cement, here's what you do. Take those little extra pieces and just stuff them down in there. And look at that. I don't push it down too hard, just enough to get it down in there, and now our liquid cement mixture has raised up a little bit over the surface. Let's give it a little shake, get that air bubbles out of there again. See those air bubbles rising? That's what we want. And we're done. So at this point, I'm gonna let this sit here for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I'm gonna cover it up since we're outside, but I'm gonna come back in a few minutes then, and I'm gonna show you just how I scrape it off, which is really nothing to it. So we'll be right back. Okay, it's been a few minutes. Now we're gonna use this little scrape here, and we're just gonna flatten the bottom of the statue. So let's do that now. Very simple. Now a little bit of water may come to the surface. That's normal. You just take this and just gently pull it across and flatten out the bottom. It's okay again if there's a bit of water that stays on there, that will evaporate and dry up. We just want to make sure we don't have any big lumps or anything, so that the statue is going to be flat on what will be the bottom. All right, at this point, we are going to let it sit overnight, and the next step of the video, I'm going to show you it coming out of the mold, and you'll see what it looks like. And make sure to stay tuned till the end of the video, because I'm going to actually break down the cost versus profit of this one mold that we just did. So we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day. It's time to take our statue out of the mold, and a question I get a lot from folks is, how long should I let the concrete cure in the mold? Generally, people will tell you 24 hours. That's not really the case. It's very dependent on the weather. So when I cast this yesterday, as you probably noticed in the first part of the video, it was a very hot day yesterday, and this is a small statue, so it's going to cure a lot faster. Now, if this had been a very large statue with a lot of intricate detail, maybe I'd let it sit longer into the day, but because this is a small statue, it's fine now here in the morning to take out. And one way to test on statues, so here's the mold here that we did yesterday. On the bottom where we cast it, just run your thumb or finger on it, and if it's not rubbing off real good, it's probably cured enough to take out. If you're nervous, you know, you have a big piece, you don't want to risk pulling off any intricate detail, go ahead and let it sit a little longer. Generally within 3 or so days of pouring it into the mold, your casting should be safe, and the rubber will still remove without sticking. Don't let it sit much longer than that though. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Now, I have a piece of cardboard here, a little tip. Even though this is ready to take out of the mold, it's still what we call green. meaning that the concrete is still curing and it is still prone to a little bit of chipping or that. It will get harder the next few days to where it's a really solid block of concrete, but you still want to be safe. So I always recommend a little cushion, whether it's a piece of carpet or a little piece of cardboard when taking them out of the mold so you don't chip around the edge. So we're just going to remove the rubber now. And there we go. And you see how dark it is. That's because there's still a lot of moisture in it. And if you're wondering what that's going to look like, here it is all painted up. It's a beautiful little piece, as you can see. All right, let's talk business for a second. This is what a lot of people ask me about, is how you can actually take that little statue that I showed you how to make, and you saw how simple it is, and how to turn it into cash. So I'm going to use the example of my molds. That's what I'm familiar with. That's what I make. That's what I sell. Obviously, what I'm telling you is going to be pretty much the same information wherever you get your molds. But in this case, a mold that I sell for a statue about this size, if you get the mold with the rubber and the fiberglass, you're looking at anywhere from $95 to about $125, depending on the piece. They're going to vary because of the size, complexity, things like that. If you get that same item as a rubber-only mold, then you're looking at about $30 to $45 for the mold. Again, the rubber-only mold like this one that we just used in this video. Now, you take this statue, paint it up. I sell it for $20 to $25. It depends where I'm selling it at. Again, statues this size I sell at my live shows as merchandise. I'll sell them a little cheaper there for $20, but if I sell them online, they're usually about $25 to $30 sometimes for something maybe a little bigger than this. So that one-time purchase of a mold that can be used over and over again can easily make dozens upon dozens of statues that sell for 10, 15, 20, 25 or more dollars. And it doesn't take long. So a lot of folks, what I've learned is they get 3, 4 little molds to start with for very little money, start making them by hand in their garage. I even know folks that do it in their kitchen. I don't recommend that, but some folks have been emailing me that they do it there and have started their own little side business. And that's how cheap and easy it is. And you saw, for stuff like this, you don't even need the drill. You can just do it by hand. So hope that helps you out. Now keep tuned for my next video where I'm actually gonna break down the business side of things and explain how you can actually get started making money for real doing statues as a side business or as your full-time business. So keep tuned in for that, and glad to see you, and we'll see you next time.